Hello and welcome to another edition of the Leader Campus Talks, or Voices, actually. I'm Mel Wildermuth, and with me is Cy Wakeman. And Cy is a drama researcher. She's an international speaker on leadership and management, New York Times best-selling author, and great thought leader. Also, you're on the top 30 list of the global gurus, too. So you haven't got that listed on your website. So I'll put that in there as another thing. So thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate that.
No problem. My pleasure, Mel.
So the first question is, what do you mean by the global thought leader?
Well, it's an interesting question because I'm not sure I mean anything by it. It's a title that was given to me a couple of years ago. I was awarded from the Human Resources World Congress the title Global Thought Leader. But what it means to me is that in my research, I pay special attention to make sure that the work we do takes into account the global nature of our world, and that as I develop recommendations and ways in which people can move beyond ego, that I pay attention to the various cultures and various generations, and make sure that the message translates internationally. And we have found that indeed it does. I just returned from Egypt. We work in India often. We're heading to Brazil in March, and everything we offer in our organization, we also offer in Spanish. So every blog we do in Spanish, and so we really are trying to make it a global presence rather than a U.S. presence.
I've talked to a couple other people as well, and some of them have said that they do not notice a difference between different cultures in dealing with leadership. Do you find there's a difference in leadership in different cultures?
You know, I can't say there's not a difference. What I would tell you is that everyone's pain comes from the story they tell themselves, not their reality. And so the stories might differ a bit, but I study drama, and I have found that to be a universal condition of people having drama in the workplace and wasting a lot of time and energy on drama. So I think there are some differences, but certainly not the differences we have really promoted in the 90s and early 2000s. I really think the world has gotten pretty flat.
Okay. So, what do you mean by this drama? Can you mention any kind of drama occurrences that you've seen in business?
Sure. Just to let the audience know, we've actually, in our organization, worked to quantify drama because we wanted to know the financial impact of drama in the workplace. And in the work I did in 2016 for my latest book, No Ego, we were able to quantify that the average person spends 2.5 hours per day at work in drama. And that's like 816 hours a year. And so what we mean by drama, how we defined it in our research, is basically emotional waste, unproductive thought patterns, disruptive behavior. And we even went to find out what are the sources of drama. And I think that's what you're asking. And there's really 5 main sources of drama in the workplace. And we've labeled them, the first one being ego behaviors, the second one being lack of accountability, the third one withholding buy-in, the fourth one resisting change, and the fifth one withholding engagement or choosing disengagement. And the highest of that is ego behaviors. About 30% of all drama is caused by ego behaviors. And those are things like gossiping, tattling, venting, judging, scorekeeping, basically being outside of your own business and doing that with a filter of ego, with judgment towards others. And so a huge amount of behavior comes from ego. And unfortunately, many of the leadership techniques we've taught leaders actually fuel the ego, fuel the drama rather than diffuse it.
Okay. Uh, what do you mean by fuel it rather than diffuse it?
Well, one of the things that we found when we were interviewing leaders, when we asked about venting, is that many leaders had understood from their leadership training that one of their roles is really be available to employees with an open door for venting, that if employees were upset, they would come to their leader and their leader would listen and just allow them to get things off their chest. And my background is therapy, and in therapy, we really work to help people move beyond venting, because venting really just begets more venting. It's a behavior, not really a sharing of emotions, and venting really is the ego's way of avoiding self-reflection, and self-reflection is really where people can go to identify where they can have impact next. And that really is what leads to engagement. So an example is, people talk about venting, like venting feels good and venting helps. And what we know is venting really doesn't help. And so we teach folks, leaders, something very different when people are venting. We teach them to ask very specific questions for self-reflection. We call them the ego bypass. And so you might come in and be complaining to me about IT and they can't manage their way out of a paper bag and they should be fired. And I might ask you a question for self-reflection that might say, what did you do to help? What's the situation and what are you doing to help? And that really pops people out of their frontal cortex and ego into a different part of their brain and gets them really focused on where they can have impact and really builds accountability. And so we have found that some of the typical things like keep an open door and be available and be there for people when they're venting, that we teach in traditional leadership is really counterproductive.
So how does this reflect in your other idea about the reality-based leadership?
Well, reality-based leadership is what we call kind of our whole philosophy, and it seeks to help people have a less distorted view of reality. And many leaders enable people's view of reality, and the ego really distorts your view of reality. And so with leaders, we really help people focus less on changing their reality or blaming their reality, and instead on growing their own skill set to be more skillful in their current reality. So a nice example of that, in fact, when I would teach college courses, one of the first things I would do in my social psychology class is I would put a little tiny piece of paper on the lens of the projector that was projecting my slides. And somewhere during the course, I would ask somebody, one of the students, while I was discussing, I would say, can you go see what's wrong, why that spot is up there on the screen? And inevitably people would go up and try and scratch the screen.
Uh-huh.
And they rarely thought about it being on the projector. And in most leadership, we're working on the screen, not the lens of the projector. And in reality-based leadership, we really focus on working on the lens of the projector, which is how the employee sees the world, rather than how the world must change in order for us to be able to add value.
So that's a similar thing to, I can't remember who else I talked with, but their emphasis also was on looking, that we have to have an idea of looking through the lens rather than what the lens is looking at. We have to be more aware of what our vision is. And so it sounds like similar to yours.
Very much so. And if most people don't realize how much their ego is distorting and narrating reality, they really believe if they thought it, it's true. And we really teach people to question their own thinking, that they're not really the person thinking, they're the one observing the thinking. And so some of our best advice is like, stop believing everything you think, because if you walk by me and don't say hello, I really don't know much for sure. But my ego will narrate that ever since you got that promotion, you're rude. And then I'll treat you rudely, and then you'll respond rudely. And then I say, see, I'm right about things I make up. And a leader's job is to help people use a better mental process than that, to have a more accurate view of reality than that, because your data is corrupted. So with good data, you can make better decisions. Good data would mean I don't know why that person didn't say hello, so I conserve my energy and just go on to add value. A leader can help people use a better mental process so they aren't consuming all this energy and drama.
Does authentic leadership feed into this?
It really does. It really does. I get calls all the time for people to, come and train my people to be more accountable, or do you have a program on increasing innovation, or how can you help get people engaged? And what I tell people is all of those things, collaboration, innovation, all those behaviors you're hoping for, are people's natural state once the drama's gone. So once they're beyond ego, that is authentically there. It's in all of us. And we're approaching it in what I think is a ineffective way. We want to add that to people, or we think we need to change people to teach them things like innovation. But I take a whole different approach to it. It's something you uncover in your people as you teach them better mental processes to eliminate emotional waste. And a quote I love, I recently saw the statue David and by Michelangelo, and it was just a stunning statue. It was surprising to me how beautiful it was. And our tour guide relayed a story that he was asked if carving or creating David was difficult because it turned out so beautiful. And he said, actually, it wasn't that difficult. He just needed to remove everything that wasn't David.
Wow.
And that David just appeared. All he did was took away from the marble everything that wasn't David. And we believe that what leaders can do is take away the drama, which is ego and not an authentic self. That people really toggle between their lowest self and their highest self. There's a toggle switch. They're either in ego or beyond ego. And leaders can help people stay toggled into that higher self, which corresponds with the authentic self.
So is that part of also that's bulletproofing of employees?
It's a bit of bulletproofing employees that goes beyond finding what's there and actually then helps people strengthen it. I, started out my life as a therapist, and when people would come to me, they, were seeking success and happiness. That's basically what everybody wants in life. And I would ask them what they had been doing to get that so far. And every client would show the flaw in their logic. They would say, well, in order to be happy or successful, I would need a different, and then you fill in the blank. I'd need a different spouse or a different boss or a different job, or I would need more money, or everything they thought their happiness and success was related to was their circumstances. And so one of the universal principles we teach is that your circumstances aren't the reasons you can't succeed or you can't be happy. They're the reality in which you must be happy. So applying that to the workplace, when people come in, they usually want the leader to go change reality, go get the other person acting differently, or go, get us more money or more communication, or, something different in reality on the theory, then they would succeed. And what we teach leaders to do is, instead of moving to try and fix reality, which is impossible in the short term, grow your people instead so that they're more skillful in their reality. And that's what we mean by bulletproofing. If I can grow you, then you are immune from all the things that are happening in the external world, and you're a bit bulletproofed. So an example of that early in my career is I worked with a lot of physicians, and I really want my boss to make all these physicians behave and never raise their voice and, communicate well. And she said, I think I would have better odds just growing you into a more skillful handler of emotion. And so she grew me to be very skilled in handling high emotion. That way I could just walk freely in the world, no matter what a physician was doing. I could handle the situation. So I didn't have to control every physician in the world. I just had to learn a skill set that was really able to quickly resolve conflicts.
And so it sounds you're about the fifth or sixth person now that I've interviewed that has this understanding of neuroscience. So is it to some extent necessary, or is it to some extent very important for the leader to understand aspects of neuroscience as well? Because now we're starting to get into a different field altogether.
Sure. What I hope we do in our organization is we translate for the leader so that they don't have to understand neuroscience, but they can trust that what we teach is evidence-based. And I think for a long time, we have taught a lot of things in leadership that were not evidence-based, at least not to the extent that one would expect when reviewing research and really, being true to kind of a scientific method. And so I don't know that the leader needs to understand it. What I think in HR and leadership development we need to do as a favor to our leaders, because they don't need to understand the brain, but we can tell them quickly how the brain works and align what we're recommending more with the brain, is I would say that our philosophies need to better align with what we know from science. When I was a therapist and I transitioned into being a leader, I was actually shocked at times how far off what we taught in leadership development the theory was from the evidence. And so when I first got to be a leader, they said, Sai, you're responsible for the engagement of your people. And I said, you mean their happiness, like their workplace happiness, like, and their motivation? And I said, well, that's an inside job. That we all know that motivation is really internal and it's locus of control. And they said, no, you're responsible for their engagement. And I said, well, we teach people in therapy that you can't make another person happy. It's called codependency. It's actually a diagnosis. And that accountability is what drives engagement, not external circumstances. And so I just found time and time again where we were moving against the natural order and setting leaders up to fail. And so I don't think they need to understand it, but I think what we teach, if we're responsible leadership development folks, need to be rooted in that evidence.
Take us through at least maybe the top 3 problems then that you see that we teach incorrectly in leadership now in training.
I think engagement's a big one. So I think that engagement's fabulous. I want people to be engaged. But the way we look at engagement, we've over-rotated, and engagement without accountability has been creating entitlement. And so we, as a philosophy, when we do an engagement survey, we believe every vote should count the same, and everybody has a say, and every vote's equal. And I frankly, when you look at accountability levels, your high accountable folks have done what they can to succeed in the current circumstances, and then they give you feedback on how the organization can help. Your low accountable folks will believe it's all the organization. And so the engagement data we get is corrupted unless you sort by accountability levels, which in my research we've been able to do. So you can just listen to your most accountable and see what part really is the organization's part. So I think the way we handle engagement, where we really believe that engagement drives results and that we can engage people by perfecting circumstances, is really way off. And in my new book, I talk about not just what's wrong, but how to fix it. I also think the way we teach change management is really archaic. When I went to my first change management class, they gave me a list of everything the leader needs to do. And I asked, well, what's the employee do? And basically it was wait for it, critique it when it comes, be a victim about it, get into drama around it. And so we teach business readiness rather than change management, because one of the biggest flaws in change is we promote this reality that change is hard. And I hear leaders say all the time, I know change is hard. But what I found in my research is change is only hard for the unready. And so we've got to stop telling people change is hard, because it wouldn't be if you maintained a state of readiness. And what I mean by that is, if I am very technically savvy and I've kept up with every upgrade on my smartphone, and you have the same flip phone you've had since high school, you've skipped every upgrade, and the employer gives us both a new smartphone, change isn't equally hard for us. It's only hard for you with the flip phone. I'm ready. So change for me, I'm just grateful they gave me a new phone. I get my stuff off the cloud, I move on. You have your flip phone, you're curled up in the fetal position, and we keep saying it's change that's hard. And we take away from the employee, if you don't want to struggle with change, then stay in a state of preparedness, because then change is not difficult. It's just the next step in evolution. So I think those are a couple of the things, besides the venting and the real focus at times in HR on how do we fix circumstances. I have one more quick story about what about that circumstance piece if you've got the time.
Oh,
It
sure.
it When I first was a leader and someone came to me and they were sharing with me that they really had an issue because they were scheduled to work with a gal named Karen, and they had a personality conflict, and she wanted me to reschedule her so that she would never have to work with Karen. And they had been with HR, and they had made all these accommodations so these two people don't have to work together. And I didn't even realize I was doing anything out of the ordinary from a therapeutic background. I said, oh my gosh, I said, you're telling me that you're not able to work with somebody on the schedule. I said, and you're a nurse, and I need you to be able to deliver quality care regardless of what's going on in your world, who you work with, or what family is in, or what patient is. And so I said, I want to help you, so I'm going to put you on administrative leave, and I want you to come back with a plan on how you can improve in order to be able to work with anybody. And she was shocked because everybody had always worked harder on her success and rearranged the schedule and made sure that she was isolated so she didn't have to grow and develop and work with different personalities. And I just took the step on, what kind of life is that? I'm going to strengthen you so that you can work with anybody. And she was only off a couple of hours. She came back with a plan on how she could be more tolerant, how she could be more assertive, how she could be more direct. And then we never had to fix the schedule again because she learned how to work with anybody. But the average HR approach would be, how do we do conflict resolution, and how do we game the system so this person doesn't have to grow? And for me, I'm like, welcome to reality. Give them a big hello. Here's what you're going to learn next. It's how to be able to work with more than one person that you may not like. And I think we do that often. We coddle the people when reality is inviting them to grow, which then would make them more capable and ready for what's next. And we enable, as a leader, them not to grow.
That's fascinating. I so much have enjoyed talking with you.
Well, thank you, Mel.
It's great. And if you could or would please, as part of a reward, I guess, for being interviewed, how about plugging your book?
I would love to do that. My newest book is called No Ego, How Leaders Can Cut the Cost of Drama and Entitlement and Drive Big Results. And I, too, have a podcast entitled No Ego, and I would invite people to follow me anywhere on social media at Cy Wakeman.
Okay. Well, Cy Wakeman, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. And we maybe be able to get back to you sometime soon.
Would love that, Mel. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.